Welcome to Perpetuity ARC Training Podcast. My name is Chris Northey-Baker, and I'm a Senior Associate Trainer with Perpetuity ARC and a Chartered Security Professional. This podcast will cover security risk management. Definitions. Security comes from the Latin word se and cura, free from worry and harm. Asset, something of value to the enterprise and which requires protection. The biggest asset to any organization are humans. They cost a lot of money and a lot of years to get them to the top level. Threat, a function of an adversary's intent, motivation, and capability. If we look at ISIS, they have the intent, they have the motivation, and they have capability of mounting attacks. The likelihood, the probability that an event will take place, we don't know when or the location, but it will take place. Vulnerability, any weaknesses that can be exploited by the threat. A vulnerability of the main entrance to your site. It may only be detected by a small barrier, but behind, is there any hostile vehicle mitigation measures to prevent a vehicle-borne threat entering your site? That is a vulnerability to look at. Consequences, the impact of an event taking place. And lastly, risk, the potential for loss or harm, the loss of a site or the harm to people. So what is risk? I will ask you a question. When was your last risk assessment? Most people say, well, probably a couple of weeks ago. My last risk assessment was just prior to this podcast to ensure the mobile phone was switched to silent, the doorbell was disabled, and the dog was out in the garden, away from any interference of the podcast. So when was your last risk assessment? So what is risk? Well, it's a vulnerability. And what is a vulnerability? The quality or state of being exposed to the possibility of being attacked or harmed either physically or emotionally. Consequence, the result or effect, typically one that is unwelcome and unpleasant. And lastly, threat. Threat is a statement of intention to inflict pain, injury, damage, or other hostile action on someone in retribution for something done or not done, i.e., the chief executive of your company has received death threats. So vulnerability, consequence, and threat all make the components of a risk. Security risk analysis methodology. Security is a function of the following: consequences, vulnerability, and threat. Consequences equal direct and indirect consequence of a successful act against an asset. V equals the vulnerability of the asset to the act. And lastly, T equals the threat associated with the act. That is a methodology. So, characterization. Understand what critical assets need to be secured, their importance, and their independencies. From this, we can see that critical assets certainly will be your computer system is critical to your business. So therefore, we need to understand their importance and their interdependencies in interface with the people that use them. Threat assessment. Identify, characterize threats against the asset and consequences if compromised. Vulnerability assessment. Identify potential security vulnerabilities that will increase probability the threat will be successful. ISIS, AQ, when they're doing attack, they will carry out a vulnerability assessment. They will look for weak areas that they can attack and get through to be successful. So the risk assessment. Risk determined by the likelihood of a successful event and the maximum credible consequences of an event if it were to occur. Rank the risk of an event and make recommendations to lower the risk. In this, we would look at ARP, that is, looking at taking the risk to as low as practicably possible. The risk treatment. Identify and evaluate risk mitigation options and reassess risk to ensure adequate countermeasures are being applied. So here we're looking at how to take down the risk to a low level. Sometimes risks, we cannot mitigate the risks down to low options, and therefore they have to be managed by the C-suite because it's too high a risk for you, the security manager, to manage. So look at the risk mitigation options, and from that determine what can we do. Sometimes a risk mitigation measure would be to take out an insurance against an attack, and therefore mitigating the risk. So if something happens, then there is going to be money to come back. Evaluate responsibilities, capabilities, and the ability to adjust operations to meet its recovery goals. Here, what is the business response? Do they have sufficient understanding and the capabilities of manpower? And can they adjust their operations to make its full-term recovery and gain production line again? Protection approaches. Well, there are various protection approaches, and one is copycat security. Because a company ABC do it, then everybody does it because they think company ABC is a really good company. Reactive security. You put in place security measures in reaction to a loss or incident. So something has happened which you weren't expecting, it wasn't on the risk register, and now, therefore you're being reactive to the incident to prevent it happening again. Piecemeal security. Your site expands, you add more security on. More CCTV, more lighting, more perimeter intruder detection systems. Or it could be a new complex within your site that needs extra protection. So it's called piecemeal security, piece by piece. But the best of all is baseline security. You have a standard minimum level of security for all your facilities, be it in one country or be it global. Everyone stands to one line of security, the baseline. Everyone works to that. Some may have to be a little bit more, depending on what the threats and where they're located. So this comes into play with security risk management. You apply security measures in accordance with the formally assessed level of security risk. The risk from terrorism or the risk of a criminal attack is dependent on its location. So baseline security and security risk management are probably the best approach. Put in place baseline measures, then build upon those by doing in accordance with whatever the threats and your risks are. Security policy framework. Security policy framework comes from government. The responsibility for security of government is delegated down from the Prime Minister and then to the Cabinet and then down to you, the security manager. But you're in a private organisation, but you still follow the procedures of a security policy framework. So what is within security policy framework? Well, it's a protected security. It reflects the UK's widest national security objectives. Ensure most sensitive assets are robustly protected. Security must enable the business of government. Deliver services efficiently and effectively by digital services wherever appropriate. Key to all of this is risk management. Assessments will identify potential threats, vulnerabilities, and the appropriate controls to reduce the risks to people, information, and infrastructure to an acceptable level. As mentioned previously, we take it down to ARP, as low as reasonably practicable. Attitudes and behaviour are fundamental to good security. Security culture. How good is the culture within your business? What is the proper expectations? And how effective training is in your company? A good security culture will ensure people are observant. If they spot someone without a badge, they will challenge them. A poor culture is, oh, well, he's probably forgotten his badge. It'd be okay. Is it okay? Good culture. Good, effective training. So everyone knows they have a part to play. From the cleaner to the chief executive, they all have a part to play in good security, good culture. Policies and processes for reporting, managing and resolving security incidents. This is only part of the framework. The framework covers security outcomes, good governance, as we've talked about, culture and awareness, risk management to ensure that the risks are looked at, managed, and then reassessed either on a 3 or 6 monthly basis. It's dependent on the level of the risk and how much level of risk is accepted by the business. Information, protecting the information, be it in a paper format or electronic. Technology and services to ensure that the firewall protecting your business is strong and robust to prevent any attacks by cyber. Personnel security. We have a lot of people working within an organization or within government. All people are security cleared to an appropriate level of what they are required. Within private companies, you can have people from just a basic check right through to developed vetting, depending on if they're working for government work. So, but in a private company, we would look at doing a basic check, verification of records, past employment, to ensure the person is who they say they are, and they are as good as they're saying they are. Physical security, to look at the aspects of the building security, your access control, your fence line, your lighting, your perimeter intruder detection systems. Preparing for and responding to security incidents. How good are we? Do we test our security? Do we test our security incidents? Can we adapt accordingly? Can we respond? Are we good at responding to security incidents? Policies and priorities. We need policies, and policies will have a priority, and then comes down subsets of procedures. Information security. Here we'll look again, is it paper? Is it electronic? and then looking at GDPR and how we protect all the information. And finally, accountable. Who are we accountable to? Within the private business, we are accountable to the chief executive and the C-suite and to the shareholders. Within government, we are accountable to the head of department. Accountability. So we've covered security risk management, but only partially. As I said, this is a podcast, and it's a small, bite-sized look at security risk management and the functions that make it up. Should you come on our courses, then security or risk management is taught on all the courses. But it's dependent on which course you come on, will be to depend on the level of risk management or level of risk we look at. If you come on our 2-week courses, SM1, 2, and 3, they're looking at the tactical, the operational, and the strategic. So we would look at the tactical risks, the operational risks, and the strategic risks of an organization. If we're looking at other courses, it is a lower level and looking at risk associated with in the organization or business. Hopefully, this podcast has given you food for thought, and we will welcome you to any of the courses and look forward to meeting you and teaching you. Thank you very much for listening to this podcast.